just feel like to get to a certain level of your business, I think it is really important to always kind of reach back and say, hey, the reason why my business is like this, the reason why I am so vocal about being Black owned should come from a place of pride.
The question we have for today's episode is, does it help or hurt to label a business Black owned? Also, the guests for today's episode include community educators and co-founders of SoulStir Tea and Wellness, Kristina and Erin Walden.
So this question actually is one of multiple layers, but so after George Floyd's death, there was a temporary upsurge in support for Black-owned businesses and people championing their support with stickers on their social media stores and hashtags everywhere. And actually, our segment Black-owned Business of the Week was originally created by myself to do something beyond a black square to help showcase businesses by our people. And the question was brought about after seeing an episode of Earn Your Leisure with the CEO of Bungee Brand, a Black-owned high-end quality sneaker brand by Daryl Austin. And he said on the episode that at his particular showing, he had our people, and this happens a few times, but they ask, you make this, almost in disbelief of the quality. And so sometimes there's a perception that we have of things being Black-owned. And my goal is to have a conversation around the effectiveness of the said labeling and the consequence of the perception. All yours.
All right. So as far as a basic line, I don't believe to label yourself as a Black-owned business can hurt the business. I believe that your customer is your customer, or the people who you're serving and the people who want to patron you are the people who want to patron you. So at the end of the day, it's going to be a win-win situation. If they come in and they patron you, especially because you are a minority-owned business, or whether they come to patron you because you provide quality product, then that's a win-win situation. I know there's a lot of concern oftentimes for businesses to label themselves as anything, but especially in this economic, I guess, environment at this point, there's a lot of benefits that often come up when you are designated as a minority-owned business, when you're designated as the woman-owned or a business that specifically has an owner who is queer or whatever. There's a lot of benefits that come that way. So in short, I believe that you can never hurt your business by designating yourself as something. Now, I do believe a whole bunch of other stuff kind of goes behind what your mission is as a Black-owned business, that you should put a lot of care and a lot of pride in it as to not water down what it is to not take an opportunity, because it's not about just, hey, taking an opportunity. We have tons of awesome products out here, awesome creators who are doing wonderful stuff. But I just feel like to get to a certain level of your business, I think it is really important to always kind of reach back and say, hey, the reason why my business is like this, the reason why I am so vocal about being Black owned should come from a place of pride.
Yeah, I would say more than anything, it creates an opportunity for people that want to support Black-owned businesses to be able to, because now it's easier for them to identify or find or locate businesses that identify as such. So for example, like our business, we own a tea and wellness company and founded a tea brand. Tea is so universal. So it's not like our customers only Black people, right? We service all kinds of people. But we found that particularly during that period that you mentioned, Brian, during the pandemic, after the George Floyd situation, where there was a lot more opportunity for businesses to be able to put that label, that tag on if they wish to, that a lot a lot of consumers were able to find us through these new networks. So because we put, say on Google, Black-owned business, we put that label up there, or because we were then featured in a lot of marketplaces that were for Black-owned businesses, folks that wanted to specifically patron Black-owned businesses and to support them and to spend their dollars with Black-owned businesses or small businesses or businesses that identify in many of the ways that Erin mentioned, it was a lot easier for them to do so. And it's not just Black people that are supporting other Black people, right? So for example, we have a customer who has been really loyal, and we know specifically that she found us through a Black-owned business listing site. And she is not a Black person, and she's somewhere in Michigan. I don't know how she identifies, but we do know specifically that she found us by way of that. And I imagine that for her and for many people, it's a way to be able to level the playing field, because obviously there has been a lot of, it's not equal distribution when it comes to economics or exposure for Black businesses. So in our personal experience, I think we have found there to be more advantages in doing so. And I think it really only, where I really only see the possibility of real harm is if you were trying to hide the fact that you're a Black or minority or women or, you know, queer, whatever, own business, right?
Yeah.
If you are the face of your brand, or largely present in your brand, it's not a secret anyway, you know? So, I mean, if you were trying to hide it, then maybe it could harm you in some way. But, you know, if someone lands on our website, they may not know right away, you know, they're coming to buy tea. But if they go there and they go to the About Us tab and they read our story, they're gonna know some of who we are or how we identify or what's important to us, what our values are. And so,
I think that's why I said it goes back to that. Once you do designate yourself, you really, I would hope that you would come from a place of pride. And, you know, and that's kind of something that you carry along, because again, I think opposite of that is when you're trying to hide yourself.
Yeah.
That actually reminds me of, there was another episode of Earn Your Leisure in which they had another entrepreneur on, and he was talking about his experience, and he doesn't openly present himself as the face of his brand. He does, at first he would at times hide his face, or I guess get other people to do things, because he actually lost business because he would schedule these meetings, and then once they found out he was Black, they would no longer be interested in working with him, which is insane. But I mean, it's, people have certain beliefs, and racism is well and alive. That's you can't really dispute that. But that did remind me of that.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great point, Brian, because we're not trying to diminish the fact that we know that discrimination exists, that there are folks that are certainly not going to patron businesses that identify as such. But is that your customer?
Right.
No.
Quite.
It's like, I don't want you,
to.
you know, again, that's why I said it, you know, to me, it doesn't hurt, because even if I gain a customer, as Kristina just got done giving an example of, who sought us out because they were seeking out a Black-owned business to patron, they were seeking out a minority-owned business, minority-owned tea company, you know, then awesome, you landed on us and you wanted to patron us. But you know, overall, even if you just came across us and, hey, you get the authenticity of the Soul Sisters of Tea and all that we bring, and you still want to patron us, then awesome too.
And for me, it's like, I think we as Black entrepreneurs, as Black business owners, as Black people in general, I think we're too often too concerned with assimilating, too concerned with whether or not someone is going to support us for being who we are.
And now to take a brief pause from today's episode for our Business of the Week segment. This week's Business of the Week is Kiwi Teas by SoulStir, co-owned by sisters, tea lovers, and holistic wellness advocates Kristina and Erin Walden. The sisters, who have a love for food and beverage, handcrafted goods, and holistic living, were inspired to merge their passions to create an all-natural, eco-friendly artisan tea brand eponymously named Kiwi, Kristina and Erin Walden inspired teas. My personal favorite after our citrus fusion blend, of course, is their sweet mahogany roast. Check out their website to place your order today. Now back to the episode.
Because quite frankly, I mean, is anyone going to stop supporting Walmart or, you know, these major companies that we know by and large are not owned by Black people or people of color in many instances? I don't know about Walmart, but I'm just saying.
But even companies that we've heard where there's been discrimination that's been present, and you know, and that there are true concerns around how they brand, you know, what kind of, and we still turn around and support them. So I'm with you. I mean, for us to be so focused on, you know, who is going to support us, and especially because oftentimes these Black-owned businesses, we're starting already at a place where it's not the level playing field that you talked about earlier, right? And so for a small minority-owned business, then again, our whole goal is about how are we going to grow this business? I mean, and you can't be fixated on, you know, other stuff that really is minuscule in the grand scheme of trying to grow your business. It's just, you know.
And I think that's more reason to lean into the audience that does embrace you.
Yeah.
Like, if you're not trying to embrace me over here and I'm neglecting this entire audience over here, this lane over here that aligns with our mission, that aligns with our values, that aligns with who we are as a people, this is where I need to give my attention. It's not to the exclusion of folks over here, but if like you don't want to support me because of that, that's on you. I don't want to neglect this audience over here that does want to.
Right.
Yeah, we had a really good example of this, and kind of speaking on the not to the point of exclusion, right, or excluding other people, right? So we also run a collective along with another partner, like good partner of ours, over some years, and we do a regular marketplace that caters to Black-owned businesses, especially smaller Black-owned businesses in our area. And there was a conversation at one point in time because we had a couple of vendors who were signing up who weren't Black. They didn't have Black-owned businesses, and so we were like, well, are we going to open up this marketplace for the other businesses? Well, long story short, we pretty much came down to the point of deciding that we wanted to still keep it exclusive for Black-owned businesses to provide more opportunity, where oftentimes we're not invited into other spaces. We may not know other spaces. We may be priced out of other spaces where we can vend, especially as smaller businesses. So we wanted to make it where it is exclusive for these Black-owned businesses. However, our patrons are everybody. You know what I mean? Anybody can come to this marketplace and buy from. But again, you know, you have to be intentional in knowing what you're doing as far as what your company's mission is, right? And for not only us, I think, you know, for us to be ourselves and to show up our full selves, like I said, not to be all corny with it, but as the Soul Sisters of Tea, you know, as the Soul Sisters of Tea, but not only for us and our company, but also the mission behind our collective and what we do with this marketplace. It's very intentional because we know how difficult it can be, especially as Black-owned businesses that are trying to grow in a market that is dominated by big time corps that don't have us as their owners. You know, we're not behind them. You know?
Or not even in executive leadership in a lot of instances. I mean, in this example of our market that we run, it's been really interesting to be able to communicate our mission with transparency to our audience of supporters and patrons, but also to other vendors that are potential, other businesses that are potential vendors that are not Black owned. And so when they have reached out, without knowing, what our mission is, and we'll respond to them and just say, to provide complete transparency, this is what we're about, this is what our mission is, and this is the purpose behind our mission, to create exposure and a platform and more economic opportunities for Black-owned businesses. By and large, the response has been, oh my gosh, I didn't know, I would never want to take away an opportunity like that, but let me send some Black-owned businesses your way. So I think that going back to the point that I was trying to make earlier, too often we're too consumed or too afraid of this idea of like, oh, if we don't do everything that we need to do to make them want to support us, then they won't. And it's like, that to me was just a clear example of like, be transparent, be honest, be forthright. And again, it's not to do it to the point of exclusion of like, we're trying to discriminate against another group. We're just trying to create opportunities. And meanwhile, they're like, well, we want to support you even more because you were forthright about it.
Yeah, that's huge. Loving your own people and supporting and creating opportunities for them does not equate to hating or marginalizing other groups. And that's something that that's often misconstrued when it comes to this particular conversation.
Yep.
I actually was going to ask you about that because Erin and I had that a snippet of that conversation when you talked about expanding the collective, including other groups, and that was really interesting to hear your insight into how you arrived at that conclusion.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty good conversation too amongst our collective, because again, there was the perspective of, hey, if we do this, we can also make more money. And because we knew we were ultimately about the community anyway, the community that we went in to serve, kind of other aspects of our mission, which had to do with giving back to the Black community, making it where it was a little bit more wide open that you could patron. It's a very like village mindset. We had to kind of wrestle with, okay, hey, if we open it up and now it's a much bigger marketplace with everybody in it, the money is still kind of funneling back into our community. And it's like, yeah, I mean, there's some truth in that, but at the same time, it's kind of going back to what you said about the larger corporations. We're trying to hopefully, I'm going to say, instill or deposit the idea of how important it is to patron Black businesses, right? And especially small businesses. Start there, because I know you're still going to go to Walmart. I know you're still going to go to Walmart because it's the fastest place. It's around the corner from you, right? You're still going to go pick up whatever you're still going to get shoes at Nike. You're still going to go to this restaurant, on a regular basis. But I want you to take this opportunity to not only see a whole new business that you may not have known about beforehand. So we're giving the exposure to those smaller Black-owned businesses. But for the community that comes sees them, they can then start to follow them. They can then start to say, okay, yeah, I want to go back to this marketplace because I know I can find this business. And I want their food, because we have food vendors and everything. You know what I mean? It's really important that you get to that first, because we don't assume that our customers only patron Black-owned businesses because they show up to our market, right? But it's trying to get people in that mindset that, we're trying to grow our businesses just the same. We're trying to give back to our communities. It's so important to us. But again, it starts with you as this patron, you know what I mean? Making a conscious decision to do so in supporting the Black-owned businesses. So
yeah, our Black-owned businesses, we need these opportunities. We need these marketplaces. So like during COVID, like I mentioned earlier, when all of these online marketplaces started popping up, specifically for Black businesses, I don't know where so many of our businesses would not have been able to survive. Honestly, I know that for sure. A lot of our businesses would not have been able to survive without those opportunities, without those platforms, because you just get lost in the sauce. And back to the point that you were mentioning earlier, because we live in America and it is not, it's not of equal distribution of economically. And we know the history. We're not going to get necessarily into all that, but we know the history of things such that Black people are starting behind in many cases. So having those marketplaces and those platforms is just so critically important, because it allows for the resources to be distributed in different ways. And it's easy to get lost in a sea of, well, just in the business, I mean, in the business space anyway, it's easy to get lost. It's a lot of competition, if you will. Which also makes me think about the point, like in a space where there is so much competition, what is something that you can do to differentiate yourself? And to me, labeling yourself in one way or another, which is not so much as like the label, I don't think is what hurts. It's really saying, it's creating more of a niche, if anything. It's like, I'm a Black-owned business. Perhaps my business specifically caters to the needs and wants and desires of Black women, for instance, or, or whatever the group may be. So it's kind of creating a niche, which I think is in many ways helpful in a very competitive environment. So I look at it in ways that are, I think it's easy to look at it like, it's going to harm you because we live in a society where we have been fed this message of like, we're not good enough. You kind of spoke to earlier, Brian, about this question around like quality. Like, why would you question the quality of a product because of the race of a person? Like, that makes no sense to me. But we've been fed all these messages about being lesser than, or, not having the skills or the talents or, gifts, whatever, which we know is just complete nonsense. So being able to, kind of lean into spaces and kind of carve out special niches and make ourselves more visible in ways. I think that's what a lot of the labeling, the tags, and the marketplaces and different things like that allow us to do.
Gotcha. This was actually a question that I have pondered for quite some time as a consequence. Like, I saw that episode, I think over a year at this point, and then I've been in conversation with many different entrepreneurs, and then us ourselves expanding from being just originally a podcast out to being a network, and then eventually being a business to provide actual goods. And I really think the answer to this question, it depends on the vertical. And so what I mean by that is the difference between consumer goods and then necessities/services. And that may not be the correct terminology for it, but I hope you can kind of understand what I'm saying. So like hair care products, for example, they are definitely viewed more favorably if they're Black owned, if they're for Black people. So SheaMoisture, that's the big one. Everybody knows SheaMoisture is. They were Black owned until they were purchased in 2017 by Unilever, who acquired them when they purchased the parent company Sundial Brands. So most often when you buy hair care products as Black men and Black women, you want those products to be made by Black men and Black women because they understand us better, and we're the target audience, so we feel more comfortable in trusting our bodies with their products. And in other types of consumer goods, it might be less advantageous, and we are the only community that does not bring in outside money from other communities. So there was a study that I looked into from the Black Star Project, and they did a study on the racial wealth gap. And so, fun fact, so the dollar circulates 30 days in the Asian community. That's kind of like nebulous because Asian is there's multiple groups inside of Asian, so it's really high level. But 30 days in the Asian community, 20 days in the Jewish community and 6 hours in the Black community. So this can be severely limiting to if we are only bringing in money from our people, especially because we are a minority in the nation. So it's severely restrictive. But first and foremost, I do believe in being unapologetically Black and providing goods and services for our people in mind first, but restricting ourselves to ourselves may be counterproductive. And one of the misconceived notions that some other people have, people that are outside, they think that Black owned might be Black only, and that's not this. I wouldn't agree with that in the sense of, okay, so you have your mission, you know who you support. So look, with the example of our your tea or our tea or our bracelets, our shirt, our message, we have our people that we're taking care of first and foremost. But if you decide to purchase some tea, I don't care if you're purple, you could buy some. Like your money spends just as well as anybody else's does. But I won't allow that to influence my decisions on how I conduct myself in chasing the money. So I think regardless of the number, or excuse me, regardless where there's a number of misconceptions that we need to address, and one of the hugest ones is about the quality and then the standards by which Black-owned businesses are held to. And I'm kind of curious to hear what Josh and Des have to say with regards to that as we move into ourselves also expanding into being a larger business and being more focused on monetizing and growing.
You can go, Des.
I was just gonna say, it's funny how you brought up the Black dollar only circulating for 6 hours in, the Black community, because that goes back to a conversation we had, Josh and I, and you were there present too, when we were doing the recordings for the Star Wars shoot. But it was when we were rereading the autobiography of Malcolm X, and it was kind of going into around the same time that the whole when Kyrie Irving shared that the film on Black Jews, and what Malcolm X said specifically, like that kind of has this rift between Black folks and the Jewish community, is that in Harlem, if I'm not mistaken, Harlem was first it was an Irish rich community. And when the Irish moved out, the Italians moved in. But when the Irish move out, they don't have an anchor. So if you think about your community, the Irish have their businesses. Those businesses moved out with the Irish community, and then you have the Italians. When those Italians moved out, the Jewish folk moved in. And of course, as the Italian folks moved out, those Italian businesses left as well. When the Jewish folk moved in, and as Black folks began to move in, Jewish folk moved out, but those Jewish businesses didn't leave with it.
Exactly.
So as Black folks moved in, granted, the convenience store may be a 5 mile or 5 minute walk away from your crib, but it's not Black owned. You gotta literally search. And at this point, we're talking about the 60s. It's not. You do have to do a bit of research, just like the SoulStir said, is like the lady out of Michigan that is a fond consumer of their product. They had to search for them. But I think to go into detail about literally what we're talking about, the detail for Black folks, I think it is like the burden of having to be twice as good. And I know that's just me in general, is that as we were talking about our Project One shirt that we released, someone else may release that shirt and it'd be perfectly fine. But for me, I'm looking at it from the perspective of, if we're going to be charging folks $30 for a shirt, is it going to be able to stand the test of times? Like, I'm thinking about so much as an introductory businessman, rather than just being like, we finally got some shit off the ground. Now we can actually build, instead of just thinking from the perspective of, or instead of thinking in the perspective of, quality control, all this stuff that costs Walmart, for example, millions of dollars to, literally have a QC department. QC is literally just your everyday service folks. But, we're thinking about this, on day 15, instead of just being like, damn, we finally, got our feet up off the ground. We're finally moving. So I do think that we specifically as Black brothers in this network, we do bear the burden of having to be twice as good, because let's call it spade a spade. Like, we are Black folks at the end of the day, and people aren't going to want to sit here and look at it and be like, damn, I'm just giving my money to someone who's out there just trick it off. Like, they want to at least have the understanding that they're going to be putting their money into something that is going to be, you know, vertically integrated. It's going to be growing and putting out another shirt at some point that is 10 times better. So I think it is just having grace and like really giving yourself your flowers, because it is difficult, I would say. It's difficult to navigate.
As you were just talking, you echoed something that Erin and Kristina had mentioned as well, with the small business versus corporation perspective. And it really reminds me, like, I think about that too, Des, with the quality of products that we offer and constantly iterating over, like with myself specifically for the bracelet and then like the testing for the tee, that I'll ask you this: how many times has McDonald's messed up your order? And for those of you who still eat it, I haven't had it in years, but I'm proving a point. How many times has McDonald's messed up your order?
Look, I ain't gonna say we'll say Starbucks. Starbucks messes up my order quite a few times, but it's
Okay.
like they're always how can I say, happy to replace it. But in our case, like as a small business, like replacing that product, it's an expensive thing to do.
Well, not just that. There's a standard. So as a smaller business, you don't have the rapport with the customer as say like a Walmart or McDonald's or Chick-fil-A, like these huge brands that are at the top, these huge corporations. People are much more forgiving when it comes to them because they have that established rapport. If I give them a bad shirt, something that they put on and they like fast fashion and it rips, or something that's shoddy, something that doesn't taste good, okay, that could be my last time getting any patronage from that particular individual. And they probably read a bad review, because people will let you know when something's bad, but they won't let you know when something's good. That's just how, like, humans, if you look at like the distribution of reviews, like just people in our immediate social networks, very few people leave reviews if they're actually happy with something. It's always like you have a bad experience and now you want to go to corporate. And I mean, you probably should, if it's that bad, to let them know so they can make amends for it. But that is another dimension in which that with smaller businesses and more traditionally Black-owned businesses, because that's something I noticed too in the types of businesses that individuals open. Like, you don't see many young white entrepreneurs opening up homemade soap companies. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with having a homemade soap company, but at the same time, you can't compare, because there is no equivalent. You can't say that, okay, the white soap company is doing this because, okay, the white entrepreneur is opening up an investment group. So it's not equal. You can't really compare apples to peach cobbler, like not even another fruit. It's something completely different.
Not to cut you. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, of course, that's in part largely because of access to funding.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was about to say in a nutshell.
Yeah. I wanted to jump in because I definitely, there's a couple of things that y'all have said already that just kind of, it drives home, I think, our thing with our marketplace that we're really about, which is the education and trying to support the smaller businesses to help them grow. Okay. So a couple of things that you all said that stood out to me. One, oftentimes the corporations, right? When you had companies and they were starting out smaller, they were putting a lot of care into their products, and it was high quality, right? And then the larger your business becomes, especially, I mean, we've had conversations with some of our peers in the entrepreneurial space who talk about now they're switching over to, say, for instance, bottling their stuff. Now they're hands off. The quality becomes different. Granted, there is QC, there's, like you said, that quality control that kind of happens. There may even be a certain consistency that's different, but it may not be the same quality that it was originally. And I think when we think about large corporations, my idea of going to purchase a shirt, say for instance, we talk about Walmart a whole bunch, so I'm gonna keep talking about Walmart. But my idea to go get a shirt from Walmart is not because I'm looking to get the most high quality shirt. it's because I'm going to get something that's inexpensive.
Mhm.
So again, when I hear people have that argument about quality of something, it really kind of disheartens me, because we, as a small business, let alone a Black owned business, right, we're constantly trying to figure out, how do we have a product that we know is a quality product, but how do we price it? And then us as conscious Black people, right, and trying to do something that's for our community, to get, especially for us, because our business is so much around wellness, and getting this product to you that's going to help you be well on a holistic level, right? We're trying to make it where it's affordable for our community to buy, right? That's what we're thinking. But again, we cannot price ourselves down to the point that we can't be in competition with other companies that people are going to turn around and patron anyway. Mm-hmm. And so now this goes back to when you were talking about the hair care products, Brian. So I find that also kind of absurd when you think about it, that people got really upset with the SheaMoisture, right? I'm not gonna front. I still have some kind of SheaMoisture conditioner in my house. I'm quite certain of it. But two things that I want to say about that. One, I had purchased it prior to when it was still Black owned, right? And then what happened was, once everything had switched over with the company, it was like, dang, that joint is whack to hear. But if I went and purchased it, and now I'm giving a hypothetical, but if I went and purchased it from a Chinese-owned hair store, or I went and purchased it from Walmart, a large corporation that's also not Black owned, you're still, you know what I mean? We're still in the same small mindset about Black owned companies. So we can't talk about a Black owned company not having a product, or even their product is so specific to Black owned people, to Black people. But meanwhile, we're still patroning other sources to get certain products.
We don't control manufacturing.
We don't.
We don't control manufacturing and distribution. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And again, it comes down to dollars and cents.
But I guess, to my point, and I'm glad you said that, I think that there needs to be more, and so this goes back to the diversity, right? So you were talking about the soaps, the idea about that there may be so many Black owned companies out there doing kind of similar things. I don't think it's just a matter of not having the resources, or, what we can afford to do or not. At the end of the day, even if that's truly all that you want to do, if I buy the soap from you, right, that's super dope as a Black owned business. But if I turn around and I buy raw sugar soap from Walgreens, which is also quote unquote like this all natural kind of handmade soap or something like that, then again, it's still lost in terms of how we can grow our businesses in our community specifically. And so what I'm trying to drive home is this thought that we really have to educate our people about how it is that we keep that Black dollar rotating much longer in our community. We have to teach our patrons, really educate them on what happens when you patron us. So yes, you might have situations, I think Des was saying this, but you might have, but we were saying about, what happens when they purchase one bad product from a small owned business. You're absolutely right. It could kill that business.
Yep.
But it is going to your point, Brian, too, about that rapport. Us as a small business, we do have that rapport with our customers, because, and we're very transparent about our products. Our products are handcrafted. We tell you every single time, we do our best to have it as consistent as possible, but because of the fact that it is tea, that it's spices, that it's herbs. It may not taste the same every single time, but because we're so in touch, or because we like to be so in touch with our customer base, it makes it where they continue to come back to us. They not only have the trust in us, but then when we turn around and we do a marketplace and we're bringing on other businesses, again, it is important for us to educate those other vendors as well, that part of all of this is about building trust that hopefully we can have, especially the Black community, to invest in ourselves more. And when I say ourselves, I'm not talking about the Soul Sisters, the Tea. I'm not talking about the Infusion Breakdown podcast. I'm talking about all, including ourselves as patrons. So, I mean, again, I think it's so important. I think this is a much larger issue than thinking about how to just vertically grow. The growing part happens in your mindset. And that is where I feel like a lot of Black-owned businesses may miss it sometimes, is that because we have that thing against us where we have to work doubly hard or whatever to prove ourselves. Take away that proving ourselves. I'm not trying to prove myself to others. What I'm trying to do is get you to have your own pride in yourself, because we're reflecting it in what our businesses is doing, what our businesses are doing, what our mission is about. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And you just mentioned about the circulation of the Black dollar again, and one of the things that I think that we could do more effectively as a people, and that is to expand into different industries. So, for example, I have a friend of mine, a really close friend of mine. He has a software company, and he's a majority owner. And he's a Black man, and so I think that is brilliant. We need more Black businesses that are in different verticals that are universal, and not in the sense of, okay, let's say if I was to open up a Black hair care product, no pun intended, it would only be applicable to Black people. Like that's gonna be my consumer base. But if I have a Black, well, not even just if I just have a software company, anyone can use my software, and so that is going to make it more universal, provide more opportunities for us to bring money into our community and be able to capitalize on that. So I think that's something that is a severe hindrance, and we oftentimes, I think a lot of people forget that the goal of a business is to make money, and it sounds really obvious, but the idea is, okay, if you're going to do that, so maybe the business that you're looking to get into might not be the most advantageous one to get into, and that's a consideration. I mean, some of the most successful entrepreneurs, they've tried one business endeavor that didn't work, they tried another one that didn't work, but the third one, or I don't know how many times it takes for them to get it right, they'll find something that does stick, because it is more in demand per se. Josh, you've been in the wings, and I want to hear what you have to say about the labeling of Black-owned businesses and just your thoughts in general on what we've been talking about.
Yeah, I when it comes to what you guys are talking about, I disagree with some. I agree with some too. Mainly, we talking about supporting other Black-owned businesses. I think that's definitely very important. But in regards to the actual question, it hurts to label a business Black-owned, and that's because everything that's associated with Black people is considered ominous. And I believe because of the conscious or subconscious stigma that Black is bad and or inferior in this society, the idea of a business being called Black-owned could turn people away. And I'm sure people will say like color doesn't matter, and I seem to read that a lot lately, but I think it's reckless to say that color doesn't matter and or biases don't exist, because like one of our previous guests, Lauren Morrison, said on a previous episode, acting like you don't have any biases can be dangerous. And I think some people watching this would think of a time where they felt a Black-owned business had an advantage because they knew Black people made the food and it would be good or something like that. But to me, that's really more on a micro level. But on a macro level, that label could prevent that business from turning from a small owned business to worth millions or even billions. Like what Brian said with the guy from Earn Your Leisure, like how much money did he lose because he was Black and they just walked out of the meeting like, oh, he's Black? Nah, we out. Like how much money did he actually lose? And his value didn't increase because of that. And I feel we have yet to get to the point where Black is okay. And the constant reminder or preaching of Black pride could be threatening or uncomfortable to many white people. So once we get to the point where there's no inferiority complex or negative biases about Blackness, then calling your business Black owned, I believe, will be more acceptable. But I think one of you guys mentioned too, like the Soul Sisters, you guys mentioned like mission for self. Like what is your mission for your actual company? It's like, it's possible that some Black people don't want to be billionaires or actually want true ownership. I believe there's a lot of Black people who are just happy with making it. So yeah, it's good to be like, it could hurt, because if you're trying to like become like a billionaire, it's definitely like what Brian said, you have to work twice as hard to get, do more. So in that instance, you're trying to be a billionaire, but if you're trying to make it, maybe it doesn't hurt as much though. But I do feel like, and at the end, we have to get to the point like Black is okay. And you guys mentioned like catering to Black people. Like Black people are the largest consumer too. Like really like
definitely are.
Well, I mean, you look at how long that we keep $1 in our community. I mean, that tells you.
Exactly.
We're the largest consumers, and we purchase from everybody, and that's why it's important to purchase from us. I think to the point about the gentleman from Earn Your Leisure, he wouldn't have gotten that opportunity anyway. So I don't know if his point in saying that was to say that he was labeled as a Black-owned business and didn't get it, or whether it was to say, you all can correct me, or whether it was because he was Black, right?
Yeah.
And so, is that why?
I don't think it was the labeling, but it was specific. When he showed up to the meeting, they saw that this was a Black man, that all of a sudden, like the enthusiasm, the demeanor changed, and I mean, it was. You can tell those kinds of things. Yeah. But Josh, I definitely understand you. I understand exactly what you're saying. And with that point about the money, so yes, he may have lost out on money in that sense, but I think another thing that he held on to was his integrity. Because when you stand for something, you have a mission. Okay, you might not get the money from this particular individual that is looking for whatever service or good that you're providing, but so be it. I mean, you'll be fine with that if it doesn't align with who you are.
No, I agree. I'm of course I'm talking in the sense of we're still supposed to be integrating. Black people are still supposed to be getting along with white people. I know you guys are still more still going on like on the access, like who cares? Let's just do it for Black people and stuff like that. But of course, I was just more looking on a integrated level. And as far as like the guy from Earn Your Leisure, I would say, yeah, that's fine. I would say, yeah, I understand that, but I think just like they still looked at him like, oh, he owned this business and he is Black. I guess, yeah, he probably didn't label himself as actually Black owned, but still he was,
because they didn't know prior to the meeting.
Yeah, exactly. So he's still real. Oh shit, Black. Let's go. We out. So
I think Josh makes a really valid point, and it's unfortunate. it is a valid point, but I think it's sad that we have to consider that, because what came to mind when you were saying this, Josh, like until Black becomes acceptable, I'm like, well, how do we make Black acceptable? Like us hiding in the wings, like like it's not gonna make Black acceptable, So I just think it's really unfortunate. And another thing that came to mind was like this argument of like, well, why do you have to say you're a Black-owned business? What if I said I was a white-owned business? It's like, but that's not how systemic racism works. So like the argument of like reverse racism, miss me with that, because systemic racism is not that. You know what I'm saying? Like our livelihood is affected at every freaking level because it is built into the systems of how our society operates and functions and how it's built. So nah, fam, like you can all the way miss me with that.
It's even even if you think about it from this level. So Des was saying about when he read the book, the
Malcolm X's autobiography.
Yes. So okay, the communities and that they took their businesses with them, they all came over and they were minorities when they to Harlem. They all were. And again, there is still even if we're talking about, like you said, it's kind of hard to say with the Asian dollar because there's so many, you know, there's a lot of different groups that's within
that umbrella. You have
Yes.
Indians, Thai, Vietnamese, Chinese, Japanese.
Right. But even if you think about it in terms of so many of those groups that just took their businesses with them, and that they are, when I think I used the word cater, I think I was talking specifically about the marketplace, not necessarily like our business alone. But those businesses, like, or even Chinatown, was for them to have their own culture and everything that would be accessible for their community, because they were being discriminated in the mainstream culture. They still are able to keep their dollar within their community. We don't do that. And so I guess it's like you said, it's unfortunate, it's sad, because the idea is that we're still trying hard to play the mainstream game. And the mainstream they weren't trying to account for us. That's what I'm saying. They weren't trying to account for the minority communities in their businesses. That wasn't the goal. Yep. And so, you know, I'm all good.
When you say the mainstream game, it makes me really put it down in simple terms. Like, are you about the dollar or about the mission? Are you about the money or the mission? If you're about the money, then you're going to try to go mainstream and try to be more integrated with these companies. Maybe you stop with the Black-owned label. Maybe you just go and be like, no, I sell to everybody. I don't just sell to Black people, you know, and start making those type of statements. So yeah, I do feel that. Like, what are you about? The money or the mission? If you're about the mission.
To be an either or.
And I was about to say, even then, I have to, because what you just said was like poignant, because say, for instance, even if there's a Black-owned business who doesn't label themselves as a Black-owned business, and they may not ever have intentions on doing so, I still might feel or prefer to put my dollar in it, unless that person's business is something that I just completely don't align with. You know what I mean? I still may have a preference to patron them, because again, there's an importance in doing so to help this Black economic dollar. There just, I mean, you know, I think that
what if it was from a person like
you about to say somebody wild, and I'm about to be
Clarence
like, no.
Thomas. Clarence Thomas had a business, and you
see, like I said, Neil, unless I just don't align with them. If I don't align with them, I'm not going to, you know what I mean? And that goes for really any business for that matter. You know what I mean? Oftentimes we overlook it for those large corporations, which we talked about earlier. But the fact of the matter is, if I don't align with your company's values, like, no, that's not what's up.
So this is kind of something left field, but this conversation is make me think of this. So around this idea of like labeling and identifying, and, you know, we put everything into boxes, and I get it in part because it helps us to understand things when we can organize things in our mind and sort of compartmentalize things and things of that nature. But say take the y'all know the SWAM certification, small women, minority, whatever. Yeah. Okay. So the SWAM certification. So people make a point, oftentimes many businesses make a point to get that SWAM certification so that they can then get access to certain opportunities, big contracts, government funding, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of businesses will then put I don't know the right word that I'm looking for. They'll put a prop person in place just so that they can get that certification. So say you're not actually a woman-owned business, but we're going to put somebody in the CEO role just as a figurehead, just so we can get access to the funding for something like that. So this conversation is just making me think about stuff like that, because then that's an interesting dynamic too, because it could be taking away opportunities from businesses that really need it, that actually are, you know, women owned, or, you know, minority owned, or et cetera, et cetera. And And then we've seen, the Rachel Dolezals of the world and things of that nature. I'm just saying, you know what I'm saying? I just want to use an example that we all know.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Where people are, and I don't know Rachel Dolezal, I don't know her history, but I'm just saying, using that example, she was appropriating a culture that was not her own. And that opened some doors for her. And it's like that was taking away opportunities for actual Black students, Black professors, et cetera. Because she was taking up space in a place that maybe she didn't really belong. You know what I'm saying?
I'm going to throw out this question. This is an example to what she just said, but I'm going to throw this out because I think more often than not, who wants to label themselves as Black? Okay, that's just one thing. Like, for real, especially when we think about, like, if you're in a position that you're in the majority, I'm not going to label myself in a minority. That's one thought. But except for when it comes to urban wear. So how about the clothing companies that want to identify themselves as like urban wear, and then now you have an actual prop behind it, or say for instance a larger corporation who then buys out a smaller designer, a Black designer to do the clothing.
It only works to the advantage when you can monetize it, because we live in freaking America. Like, you don't want to be urban unless you can monetize that. Like, urban has been synonymous with Black, which has been synonymous with bad and not, you know what I'm saying? Like, all things not good. But it's like, okay, if we can flip this and find a way to monetize it, then let's appropriate, you know what I mean? Like, someone else's culture to make money off of it. And we're going somewhere else with this conversation.
No, I mean, these are good thoughts to have, and it's definitely brain food. My stance, Josh, I kind of lean a little bit more towards what you said previously, and I saw an interview with Neil deGrasse Tyson, and so he was saying, and he doesn't do any kind of engagements in which they want him to be like a Black specialist or a Black expert. That was his mission from the start, because he didn't want to be pigeonholed. So he is a astrophysicist, I believe. That's his exact his field. And the idea is he wanted to be an expert in the field. He didn't want you to only call him in when you needed a Black person to talk about something. And I get that, because that if you're only like the best, if we were only the best Black show, that means that, okay, you can still marginalize us and say that we're less than these white shows and say, oh, that's just a Black show. And that's kind of like my mindset when it came to how we branded ourselves from the start, when we started out with just the Infusion Breakdown show. Yes, we are 3 young Black men. I never hid that fact, but I never said that, oh, we're just a Black podcast, because the things that we talk about are, so okay, a large majority, or I wouldn't say that, a large percent of what we talk about are specifically focused on our community, but we talk about things that are larger than us as well, and that anybody can learn information from. So that was a bit of intentionality on my part, and I'm particularly Josh. I want to know what are your thoughts in regards to how we present ourselves. Has that ever been a thought of yours?
I know what I really thought of it more when you mentioned like the Black-owned business, actually going back and renaming it just the business of the week. So I was really more thought about that, like, and that's when it really started to think about this question, like why do you want to do that, and why is this? Because I was like, why? Like, who gives a fuck? Like, it's Black-owned business, we good, like, who cares? But then as I started thinking about it more, okay, if you really want to do your part and to like uplift whoever these companies, whether it's the Soul Sisters or however you're actually advertising that particular week, then I do feel then that it's okay to move that label aside. Like, if they want to do that, that's fine, but just to get that company out to larger people, whether it's white people, Mexican, or different other groups and stuff like that, I think that's good. And not to say that these aren't Black people, with like, not to say this disclaimer, these aren't Black people, it's okay, like nothing like that.
Yeah.
But I feel it's okay. But when it really, with me, like when it comes to I think the usual problem is when it comes to the inability to like to label, when it comes to a business to label themselves, or forgetting to label themselves as like a Black-owned business. It's the kind of like they're forgetting their Blackness. They're kind of like benefiting off the money from Black people without actually contributing to Black causes. Like you mentioned the Rachel Daza. I think did she work for BET? I think she worked for like BET or something like that. She was like a head or something.
Didn't she do something with the NAACP?
Yeah.
Or maybe that was it. Maybe that was it. Something like that.
Mhm.
But yeah, she did something like that. But it was really that they want to appeal to Black people for the money, but they don't want to actually be Black. You know what I mean? So that was really the biggest problem with forgetting like the label of Black-owned business of the brushing Blackness aside. I'm still gonna benefit off of give me your money, but I'm not gonna actually like I'm Black man, a little bit, when you're in front of white people basically.
When it's convenient.
Yeah, exactly.
The intention, I'm glad you mentioned that too, with the previously known as Black-owned business segment. My intention was to dismantle the perception that people have, because there is that negative perception, as I said, with bungee brands before. Like these businesses are ran by young Black men and women, and I'm not taking that away from them. You can't. That's who we are, and I understand and I appreciate them for being who they are too. Also, but like I said, I wanted to dismantle the perception and put them on par with these other businesses, because I don't want them to just be I see QETs. I don't see it as a like, of course it's Black owned, but I don't see it as a Black owned tea company. Like your tea is on par with any other tea company, and so it should be respected as such. It shouldn't be boxed into this little teeny niche. And like, of course, I mean you have your target audience, and I think it's a careful distinction to make between your target audience and the perception of the brand. And so what I mean by not boxing that in is that this isn't just something that's just made for this one particular group, and it's only good for them. And if you're not in that group, then you probably should go elsewhere. That's not the case. And I think that was the biggest issue that I had in is just addressing the negative perception, because I see that, and I've heard how even our people, and this could be some internalized self-hate, and that's something that Josh, you've talked about before, and how we talk about Black-owned businesses and the lack of opportunities that we provide for ourselves, and that's very disheartening. And so I think that the first and foremost thing that we need to do is dismantle the internal perception that we have. And I think the main step to doing that is to level the playing field on the internal landscape.
Yes, that's where for us, that education comes in. So a couple of things, I guess, that and just to kind of clarify, so we're, like Kristina said earlier, you can find us on Google as a Black-owned business, but that's not even necessarily our target audience.
Right.
Target audience is,
tea drinkers.
Yeah, tea drinkers, people who, and hopefully they look to us not only for the quality, but also because we do look at it as something that could be used as ritual, you know what I mean? Something that's going to help you on a holistic level. So our customers are literally everybody, and then some, because it's some people where, if we're talking about niche crowds, we have some people who come to us because it's all natural products. We have some people who come to us because we are two Black women who own this company. So whether they're looking for a women-owned business, they're looking for Black, whatever the case is. But nonetheless, it is a very real thing, Josh. Like when you talk about that pigeonhole, that kind of stuff, we're not about doing that. Our biggest thing is, aside from our company and beyond our company, we want to educate how important it is to not only support the stuff that you're like that's true to you, you know what I mean? But because we're going to show up our authentic selves, but we also would like you to patron smaller owned businesses and hopefully minority owned businesses, because again, it does help to level that playing field. It literally, for us, that's where it starts, is, hey, now here goes the exposure. Now you know about a tea company. And you don't have to say, okay, yeah, I only know about, why don't I, Bigley? What is that, what it's called? I don't even know what the other tea companies are called anymore, because I've just been but whatever they're called, like now Tetley, I guess, you know what I mean? Like no, you have a whole nother company that you can support. So just that exposure alone is important. And I think going back to the first question about the label, even if you don't label yourself as such, if I can find you under the fact that you are a Black owned business, even that can be important to people being exposed to something new. And I completely agree, Brian and Christina, because you said it as well, which is we definitely need more entrepreneurs, Black entrepreneurs who are across the board in all kinds of businesses. We need to have our own bottling companies. We need to have our own business building wrapping companies. We need to have more stuff where people are across the board. So we're not just, just doing soaps and this and that. It's like, oh, this is the only. No, we need to have these, where we're across the board. But again, then what needs to happen is my Black business is then going to go when I purchase this building and I want it wrapped. I want, somebody to put all of our branding on the building. I now go to this Black owned branding wrapping company that can wrap the building. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. That's what other groups do.
Yeah. So like I said, to me, the education is what should be the precipice to all of this in terms of trying to get our buildings, but that's going to happen at that exposure level that oftentimes comes when there is some kind of, I can find some kind of label. You ain't got to label yourself exactly as such, but I got to be able to find you as such.
So to that point, whether you label yourself or not, oftentimes others are going to label you anyway.
True.
In a very real way. So we have found ourselves on lots of lists where before we even had a Google label that said Black owned, because people saw us as the founders of our brand and they decided on their own they're a Black woman owned business, So I mean, that's true. You can lean into it, embrace it or not, but when that brother showed up into the room, those folks decided this is a Black man and we don't know if we want to support him. Or that brother showed up into the room and they were like, oh, that's a Black man too. His products are amazing and it's a Black man and we want to support it. So it's like, folks are going to support you if they want to or not.
You can't control that.
You can't. And you can't make up other people's minds about even, so it's funny, Josh, because I definitely did like this, the Soul Sisters, because I'm that person, right? But at the same time, my soul is literally my soul, right? So, and when we talk about the SoulStir, it came out of this idea of what is going to be soul stirring, for you. The experience of drinking tea for us is soul stirring. It's just a whole thing. So again, there are some people who are going to automatically look at us and be like, okay, because maybe I am like this, but at the same time, there are some people who, especially if they don't know any better, they might just see me and they're like, oh, she's so hippie, and oh, we knew what she meant by soul. She's just kind of like a soulful type. Yeah, and it's that too, It's
it's funny. There was this some years back. This was earlier on in our journey, and there was an opportunity for us to work with. Will not be named, but to work with a company on some level of manufacturing or something like that. And it was a white male owned company. And for the life of him, everything that came out of his mouth was just the most offensive. So what do you call it again? The soul sisters, and he was referring to our business name, which is SoulStir. Soul sister, and I'm like, sir, what we're not going to do is this. But then it's no, you know what? We are the Soul Sisters of Tea, but it means something different to us. It means that, but it also means I just explained, but
we can't control. We couldn't stop him from. Yeah,
he saw us and made up his mind about whatever.
Well,
And so for us, then it was a decision for us. So to kind of bring home this point, it then became our decision to say we couldn't control his perception, but then it's on us to say
whether we want to work.
Do we want to work with this person? Like, he's coming out his mouth left and right with the crazy, you know. And so we could have put down our integrity, you know, our values. We could have put that to the side and just say, oh, you know, well, there's this opportunity to get this paper to, you know, to level up in whatever ways if we work with him. Or does the heart of it all matter to us? Like, do we want to work in an environment where we're going to be degraded, or, you know, an environment that's just not conducive, you know? And so we have to make that decision.
And sometimes sometimes you make the decision based on that educating even other people. Like, I mean, it could have been an opportunity that was provided to us if we didn't feel offended, right? It could have been on us to be like, no, we still gonna take this opportunity because we about to educate you on this business and what it is for us as, you know, the soul stirring experience. But again, it has to, you know, do we align? And
I know y'all about to say something just real quick. Dad said earlier, but then I think it was Dad who said it, but then it's like, it's the burden to be like, to have to, you know, prove ourselves all that. But then it's like our burden to have to educate you about everything. Yeah.
Josh, what was your question or your point?
Oh no, I didn't have a question. I was just gonna mention what she said about you guys, they was feeling uncomfortable and they could still possibly, you know, I'm gonna get this paper, I'm gonna chase it. I think that just shows like how much we're in just this white nationalist society, and a lot of Black people will take that opportunity. And I think when they do that, they're essentially like forgetting about their Blackness to try to integrate and be more successful. And to me, I think that creates like a different type of mental trauma and inferiority complex, because like, imagine if you did and he kept like, yo, what's up, my girls, so every time he
came in with a dashiki.
every time he see, like, he's like, god damn, like it makes you feel like you already said you was uncomfortable, so he's like, nah, I'm in a contract with this guy, I gotta deal with this for the next year, 2 years or whatever. So I do think that can create like some type of mental trauma and even of inferiority complex, to the point like, damn, like, Black, okay, we get it. I'm getting sick of this. I'm Black, yeah. So yeah, but that's just really what I think.
Absolutely.
Des, what's good, man? You sitting there pondering?
No, I saw when I was pondering earlier is about you know, just what you said and how labeling yourself as a Black business does more damage than it does good. But then we expounded on the topic itself, and you know, I could see the perspective if we were talking about it from a integrated society standpoint. Like I could definitely see that.
Because I saw your face. Because I saw your face, I was like, wait. he thinks I'm thinking. He doesn't realize I'm talking about it through like, we're supposed to be integrating. You know, we're not thinking of like, fuck it, let's do it ourselves.
The guy's advocate perspective. I can see it.
Yeah.
So can I ask a question?
Oh yeah.
Of course.
Okay, so did you all hear about, and this is not going to seem related, but I think it's to what you just said, Des, and the clarity that came out of you all talking some more, like just kind of talking through all that. Did you all hear about that situation that happened with the Black-owned bookstore during the Essence Festival? Okay, so I'm gonna throw this out here as just another thing to kind of think about. So, in short, during the Essence Festival down in New Orleans, 4th of July weekend every year, there was a small Black-owned bookstore in New Orleans that was throwing a like little wellness event, and I shouldn't say little, excuse me. They were throwing a wellness event,
but on a much smaller scale compared to the Essence Festival.
Right.
Yeah.
Smaller scale. It was something that had been pre-planned. Even though everybody knows that Essence Festival falls 4th of July weekend, theirs just happened to fall that weekend too, and they had ended up getting a speaker who was I believe, a Black author, woman author from Atlanta who was coming out for the event and everything. Well, Essence got wind of it and that they were having this event. And the first thing, the way they put it out there was that this company, this bookstore, was just throwing this event. But then they ended up finding in the long run that they must have used something connected to Essence Festival as like the sale behind this author coming in town, and that it was going to be this wellness event, that it may have been connected in some sorts, right? And so Essence put a cease and desist out on the bookstore. They said, nope, you can't have your event. And it was provided to them and pretty much shut down the event. Well, within the Black community, people were hot. Not only the community down in New Orleans who was aware about this bookstore and that they were a small Black-owned bookstore just trying to do their thing as well, but people just across the board were hot about it because they were like, hey, Essence, y'all supposed to be about Black people too. And meanwhile, y'all shutting down this bookstore from having their event. And y'all know y'all have a large scale event. So now that I've kind of described it, I guess what I was curious is, what are your thoughts on that, if any thoughts, just knowing that there was a larger Black corporation, so to speak, to shut down a small Black-owned business from having something during the same time, and specifically knowing that they did try to use Essence name to capitalize and make their event bigger than what it was.
So that part is factual.
Mm-hmm. It is factual.
Okay. That part I do feel is disingenuous, and they shouldn't have done that. Mm-hmm. And what you're essentially describing is the problem that you brought forth during our earlier discussion is one of small business versus corporation, or small festival versus large festival. And I mean, that's just the nature of competition. You're going to have across any field, any sector, any vertical, you're going to have a settling of different scales, different size organizations. I can't when it comes to actually should Essence have done that, I can understand, because they're having their image misrepresented, and you have to protect your brand when it comes to things like that. Because let's say they used their branding and said, okay, well, this is attached to the Essence Festival, then they had some far right, some crazy person come out there doing crazy stuff, and like you have to protect yourself. So I can understand that from a perspective of a business owner. And one of the, as you were talking, I was thinking like the Essence Festival, that's like the celebrating Black culture. That's or a facet of Black culture rather. So it is interesting, but I do understand. I can't say that that was unwarranted, because as a business owner, I can imagine that if somebody was to attach their name to you, like if somebody said that, okay, hey, this is related to SoulStir Tea and Wellness, and they've never spoken to you about it, they have no kind of existing partnership, I'm pretty sure y'all would shut that down too.
Yeah,
because you assume you assume liability if you let something knowingly go under, or if you let an event knowingly go on that is attached to your name and something happens, and you do assume liability, because it's not up to your perspective of it, it's up to the consumer's perspective, to where they see Essence and they're going to this event thinking that it is in some way tied to Essence, and Essence didn't do anything to provide any clarity to let everyone know that this has nothing to do with us.
And the way people typically pursue lawsuits, that should not have been that hard to say, but they typically go after the largest fish in the ocean. So let's say, like, if that incident happened, let's say there's a stampede and some people get trampled at that small festival, God forbid, they could potentially, and they would be inclined to go after Essence, even though they had nothing to do with it. I could totally see that, because that's how people typically handle lawsuits. Right. Who they can get the most money out of.
Absolutely. So I think what everybody kind of said was my thought once we found out that part was factual, that they had been using Essence name. I think how it just popped in my brain when you all were just talking was that it's a shame, because again, as Black people, we have long, for one, didn't have access to most stuff. And then when we did, the mainstream was the mainstream. That's who we were getting things from, right? Our goods and everything from. That we have been so indoctrinated to purchasing the way that we do. It's an indoctrination. Be clear about that. That again, even something such as the Essence Festival, as big as it is, we want to be mad at the idea that there are two Black organizations, even though one is on a much larger scale and the other one's on a much smaller scale. We want to be upset that both of them were Black and they were going at it with one another. And again, it's just because we were still in this mindset that we have to. You said the nature of competition, right? It does exist. So I'm not negating that it does, but
are we missing opportunities for collaboration?
Absolutely. Are we missing opportunities, especially because we're already not supporting each other the way that we need to?
But see, in that instance, that conversation is one that should have been held before they started advertising their
absolutely. I mean, and like I said, there is nothing. I completely agree. Once we found out that part, it's just like Kristina said, we've had to do it, unfortunately. And then we've also been a part of stuff that has been on larger scale, such as when we were doing stuff with Something in Water, but we saw multiple businesses that were trying to, you know what I mean, capitalize off of Something in Water and everything like that, but you're not technically attached.
Yep.
So, I mean, y'all talked about the liability issues and all that kind of stuff. All of that is very true, but it's a shame because there is definitely space for us to collaborate so we don't feel an immediate competition with one another as Black businesses. But because we don't even have our own, we haven't had our own law, like we're not.
Yeah, it raises the whole divide and conquer, you know, like that has been so ever present in our history, in our experience here in America, that we are so often pitted against each other, and we already don't have enough spaces of our own.
Right.
You know, we already don't own enough things, you know, and so I think what you're saying is really like, if we can create more of our own and we set the standard and we it's based on our own principles and our own values and, you know, mores and things of this nature, that then we can find ways to create more collaboration so that we're not in a space pitted against each other, constantly competing in each other for scraps.
Yes.
Yeah. And just the nature of doing that, it's a cooperative game. So there's rules and there's a way you have to conduct yourself. And if you don't do that, you eliminate the possibility of fair play for yourself.
Yes. Yep. That's true. Yep. Which, going back to our collective, that's a big part of what we talk about is the cooperative economics, and the cooperation as a whole when it comes to working together as small businesses in a small business community. Not to say that every single business is going to stay at the same level. You know, we know that some businesses are going to get far beyond the place where they're going to continue to do the marketplace, and that's the goal, you know, in part.
Absolutely.
But we know that some businesses may want to continue to stay there throughout however long they decide to, you know, be in business, and just to continue to pour into it, and maybe they stick around to help to mentor other new business, which is what we do. We've been around for 5 years, you know, it's our marketplace, but we also still sell at the marketplace, and part of that for us is the opportunity to be able to mentor new businesses. So yeah, I think that's the larger point for us.
Nice. Anything else? Yeah, Brian?
No, there are some I guess tangents that'll possibly evolve into like later questions for later seasons that I have jotted down per usual. Like this entire thing. So I'm content with where we're at with today's episode.
Wonderful, absolutely.
What about you, Des?
No, I think we pretty much hit the nail on the head. Coming in, I didn't know what to expect because, like I said, or I think it's implied that, you know, SoulStir Wellness, they're an established business, and the Infusion Network, we're getting off the ground. So knowing how we could collaborate and put out something worth listening to, I was kind of curious about coming into it, but I think we worked out magic on this one.
Nice.
Yeah, we
Happy to hear.
appreciate y'all.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, this is good for us. Thank y'all so much.
Yeah,
Thank you for coming back.
Yes, of course.
Anytime.
And this was fun. Hopefully we didn't talk y'all heads off.
It's so funny.
This was good.
We like we're quiet a lot. So, you know, when we do have an opportunity to say a few things, it's like, okay, we're gonna say all the things and then we're going to go back in the corner and be quiet again.
But this is something, it's a passion. I mean, it's just like when you and I had the conversation, Brian, like soon as you told me, I kind of lit up, and it's like I said, it's so much stuff. This goes very, very deep. We really touched the surface. That's why you were able to still pull out so many questions. And I'm sure there's like a whole nother side that we just like did not at all like scale, you know what I mean? But nonetheless, at least within what we talked about, hopefully it does give brain food for anybody who listens. So thank you.
No doubt. Des, you have a recommendation of the week? You're on mute.
Yeah, so I'm on vacation this week, so I'm chilling. I'm gonna pass off my recommendation of the week to our guests if they have anything they wanna present to us.
Oh, how does this work? So what's the recommendation about?
Recommendation of the week is Dez's segment that he typically does. So it's usually either like a book, a film, or an album, or a piece of media or something that we recommend the viewers to consume or check out.
Very good.
Okay, so
what have we been watching lately?
I mean, The Bear, but I'm sure that's come up, right? At some point. It's not
The
Black
Bear?
The Bear. Yeah. Have y'all heard of The Bear? No.
It's on FX, right?
Yes. So it's an FX show. I mean, this is like
the level of excitement.
Oh my gosh! But yeah, no. Okay, so The Bear. That's what we're gonna say.
Really good show.
It's a really good show. But aside from that, we were talking about it earlier. Christina's about to finish it. I've already finished it. It may have come up in one of y'all other episodes, but they cloned Tyrone.
Yes, I was gonna suggest that as the secondary recommendation. I just watched it last night.
Oh my gosh, how did you like it?
Yeah,
I loved it. There's so much nuance to it, and for us as a collective, the Infusion Network, Josh and Des, the things that we talk about, a lot of those are paralleled in the film. And so from a sociological standpoint, I think that you have a deep appreciation from the film as you see the lines that are drawn between real life, reality, and what's depicted in the film. It's also very entertaining.
Yes, yeah. I agree.
Oh, what's the other show? You haven't seen it yet. I'm a Virgo.
I have seen it.
Oh, you did? Have y'all seen that one yet? I'm a Virgo.
No.
Really, really
okay,
interesting.
We too. Right now, I'm reading like 4 books, but I cannot tell you titles of the books' names, so that's why we're sticking to film and television. But I Am a Virgo is on Amazon.
I'm not sure.
I feel like.
I'm not sure.
And I think it's Amazon.
What's his name? Anyway, check it out. It has lots of the commentary, like what they're touching on, the social commentary in that show is.
It's the same brother who did The Last Black Man in San Francisco, I believe.
Yeah, and who did that what's the movie? Sorry to Bother You. Did y'all see that one?
Yeah, Sorry to Bother You. Yep.
Okay. That's another one that you can check out as well.
Okay, yes. Okay.
Okay.
We're gonna stop snapping at this point.
That was good. Thank you for coming on. Of course, you're part of the Infusion Network family. Of course, come back anytime. You're definitely more than welcome.
We appreciate you always.
Of course. But if you guys like the discussion, don't forget to hit the like button. We're going to see you guys next week. Peace.